everyone, Michael deMeng here, and welcome to Michael deMeng's Junk and Disorderly. This is an art podcast, and I am an assemblage artist. I'm also a storyteller, traveler, love movies. I love collecting weird oddities. In short, this podcast is a mixed bag of all the things that inspire me. So pull up a chair and take a listen. This week's episode, the Rougarou, a Louisiana lycanthrope. Hey everybody, welcome to Junk and Disorderly. So in this episode, we're going to talk about Cajun lycanthropes, Cajun werewolves, Louisiana beasties that grow hair and big eyebrows. You gotta watch out for those big eyebrows, big eyebrows. Yeah, that's a sure tell sign. Big eyebrows, a lot of chest hair coming out. Might be a werewolf. Now, when I think of Louisiana, I think of gumbo. I think of jazz music. I think of ghosts, lots and lots of ghosts. Of course, vampires. Of course, Interview with the Vampire took place in New Orleans. And of course, you also think of Bourbon Street and maybe one or two or three too many Sazeracs as you wander to your hotel room for the evening. But one thing you don't hear much about is werewolves. Well, guess what? They got them. That's right. There are werewolves down there. Tucked away in the bayous and the backwater Cajun country, you have werewolves. And they're called the Rougarou. Now, if this sounds familiar, it's because it's from loup-garou, which is sort of a French word for werewolf. So somehow that tradition has worked its way over probably to Canada and then down to the south. And now we have Rougarous. So in this episode, we're going to wander to New Orleans and then head to Church Point in the Cajun country. And we're going to look up all the strange tales associated with the Rougarou. And guess what? There might even be giant bats involved. That's right. Giant bats. So I recently got back from New Orleans a couple weeks ago. I was down there and I was teaching a workshop, and New Orleans is such an amazing place. I mean, it's like one of the most amazing places. It's like the closest thing to being in a foreign country without being in a foreign country. It is so different than any other city I've been to in the United States. It's a trip. I mean, you've got music and you've got folk tales and you've got strange stories and lots of crazy ghost stories. But it's amazing. It's an amazing place, rich with just so much culture. And speaking of which, one of the things that we did when I was down there, and this was part of my workshop that I was teaching down there, is we took the class to a place called Jamnola. Now, Jamnola, it stands for Joy, Art, Music, NOLA, N-O-L-A, New Orleans, right? And it's this cool place in the Bywater district. And it's a museum. And it's one of these things that is, I don't even know how to describe it. You walk in and you go into sort of a sewer. Okay, not a real sewer. It's sort of made to look like a sewer, but it's all like funky 3D, and it's got neon and day glow lighting in there and all this weird stuff. And then you end up inside what looks like sort of an animal. Now, this is all made from like found object stuff. It's all made from like, plastic bottles and all weird random stuff, yarn. I mean, just discarded materials. Okay. But it's all like neon, day glow, crazy colors, whatever. And you're walking through this thing and you soon realize you're walking through essentially the digestive tract of some beast. Because I'm going past the spleen, and then all of a sudden there's a heart, okay, and then you pop out, and what you pop out of is the gullet of what was, or is, I guess, a big giant alligator. This big giant alligator, and granted, it's not like realistic looking or anything. It's just sort of folk arty looking alligator, and that is the entrance to the museum. It's the entrance to Jamnola, which is pretty cool. Now, And by the way, I should mention Jamnola, it's broken up in different little segments, and you can go to areas, and a lot of it's very interactive, and you can make music by touching weird things on the wall, and they have different displays, and it's fun. It's a lot of fun. If you ever go down there, you should totally do it. Now, one of the things that they had right as you walk out of this giant gator's mouth was a giant puppet, and it's basically a werewolf. And the werewolf is standing there, and it's holding a big giant stick in its hand. And you're like, going, oh, what's this all about? And there's a big pot. Now this is probably, I don't know, this thing's probably maybe 20 feet, 25 feet high. So it's standing pretty tall. And then there's a lever. So, you sort of go, well, do I push this lever? Well, I mean, of course you push the lever or pull the lever, whichever it was. Well, when you did that, when you tugged on this thing, all of a sudden the big werewolf starts stirring this stick around, which then you realize, well, the werewolf is making a gumbo, right? Louisiana, right? Well, this is a Rougarou, but the title of this it's spelled R-O-U-X, like a roux, like you make a roux, to make gumbo. So it's a Rougarou because the Rougarou is making a roux. Get it? Well, that was pretty cool. So I guess I had never known prior to seeing the Rougarou that there was such a thing. I didn't know that Cajuns had a werewolf. I mean, it was crazy. I mean, a werewolf in Louisiana. I mean, I guess it makes sense. Loups-garous, that was up in, they had in France, there was the loup-garou. And then, of course, the tradition, there was stories in French Canada that there were werewolf stories from there. And so I guess it makes sense as the people sort of wandered south that some of those legends would sort of follow them. But yeah, it sort of wanders south, and it gets its own sort of weird flair when it hits Louisiana. Now, if you're interested in the loup-garou, I do have an earlier podcast where I talk about all of that stuff. So you can, listen to all that sort of stuff about that. Now, one thing I will say about werewolves, there's a deleted scene in Pulp Fiction where Uma Thurman is talking to John Travolta. And the discussion is about whether you're a Beatles person or whether you're an Elvis person. You're either a Beatles person or you're an Elvis person. There's no other. That's all there is. Well, I kind of am of the ilk that you're either a werewolf person or you're a vampire person. If you like monster movies, and you either are going to like a vampire movie or a werewolf movie better than the other. You relate better to a werewolf or you relate better to a vampire. One of two things. When you're young, vampire is and you're young and you're beautiful and all this other stuff. Vampires are very, you're eternal. You're eternally young. You get to be young and beautiful and okay, but as I got older, and I used to be a vampire person, I mean, to some degree I am, but I think I've become a little bit more of a werewolf person for whatever reason. I don't know. There's something tragic about it. They're sort of Shakespearean. You have this trapped soul. I remember reading Hermann Hesse's novel Steppenwolf, which is about a man who has a wolf inside of him, but it's metaphoric. These two coexisting, the guy who wants to be artistic and maniacal, and the other one that's more refined and cultural, and all inside the soul. And so I think that's what the werewolf is. It's, I think it sort of plays off the interest of not the aristocrat like vampires do, but more of this should I be crazy and wild and artistic, or do I need to be reserved? And it's that conflict. So I find that to be, as I get older, I find that to be more and more intriguing. All right. So enough about that. Let's kind of look into some of these tales from Louisiana. All right. So let's start off in a place called Church Point. And this is an Acadian parish. and it's known as the buggy capital of the world. Now, when I say buggy, some of you here think there's lots of mosquitoes or cicadas or gnats or something like that. Not that kind of buggy. It's known for all the horse-drawn carriages that used to frequent this place. Now, having never been to Church Point, Louisiana, I have no idea if it's still the buggy capital of the world. I would imagine there's some allusion to the buggies of years past. But yeah, apparently they resisted the old cars coming on in, even to the 50s. They were still trotting around in their little horse-drawn carriages. Now, the other thing about Church Point, though, other than all the buggies, is that is the home of Cajun Mardi Gras. Now, Cajun Mardi Gras is a little bit different. Now, I've never been to a Cajun Mardi Gras, but I've had friends who've gone to them, and it's kind of a wild experience. So you wear these big, colorful patchwork outfits. You have these strange colorful cone heads, little cone hats, look like giant, crazy dunce caps. And it's this maniacal dancing sort of event. So this is something that takes place right around Mardi Gras, same time, right? And people were running around doing stuff. But what are they doing? They are running around looking for gumbo ingredients. So they're going door to door or person to person. It's like, we need celery. And they do crazy things to try and get celery. Oh, butter. And the idea is they're going around gathering ingredients as part of this tradition, gathering ingredients so they could make a big, giant gumbo. Now, sounds pretty fun. Now, the one thing is the one of the last things they do is run around chasing chickens, trying to gather up chickens for the gumbo. Now, it kind of sucks if you're a chicken, but, gumbo's good. Chickens be damned. Well, as I said, it sucks if you're a chicken. But they chase them around, gather them up, and they make a yummy, 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 yummy gumbo. Now, what does this have to do with Rougarous? Well, a couple of things. Now, first off, Mardi Gras is right before Lent. And Lent is when you give up all this stuff. It means you're sort of like, you're feasting. You're like, I'm eating this and I'm doing this and I'm drinking and I'm being merry. Because Lent, you got to give up stuff. You got to give up meat. You got to give up, all these different things for Lent, right? The thing is, how do you become a Rougarou? Well, there's a few different ways. One is you're bitten by a werewolf, Rougarou, and you survive the bite. And then you wake up later and you're like, ooh, somebody bit me, which is odd enough. And then, a month later you start growing hair and fangs and pointy claws and all that other stuff. Now, the Cajun version, in some cases, some versions have the same thing. You're bitten by a werewolf. But there's another way to become a werewolf if you're a Cajun. And that is not observing Lent. You don't sacrifice. You don't say, I am not going to eat this meat. That's the risk you run. If you say, it's Wednesday, I'm going to have a big pork roast. Well, do that. You might be gnawing on the neighbors the next day. So not observing Lent can get you into werewolf trouble. Okay, so in Church Point, which is an area in Louisiana, a little town in Louisiana, a little parish, and there's a guy named Jean of Church Point. I don't know if he's that, hello, I'm Jean of Church Point. I don't think he does that, but anyway, there was a guy. I don't think he's still around. But apparently Jean of Church Point was a little bit odd. And incredibly superstitious. Superstitious to the point of where, he wouldn't step on cracks, didn't want to break his mother's back. He didn't want to do any of that. The other thing that he would do is he would always take a different route when he was walking to town. So So, he'd go, oh, I'm going this way and this way. Now, I don't know if at some point you'd think you'd have to take the same route. Unless he's really going out of his way. But there must be some superstition. I haven't looked it up, but there must be some superstition where, if you go the same way, something bad will happen. Or who knows, maybe it's something that he made up in his head. But regardless, when he'd go into town, he would always take a slightly different path. Okay. Well, one day, Jean of Churchpoint, sees a sort of a craggy old man, and he's got a dog, really mean dog. I don't know the type of dog. And he's sicking his dog on his little kitty. Meow, meow. Now, Jean steps in. Hey, you. And, he sort of, rumor is he looks the man in the eye and goes, okay. I don't know if anything was said. Rumors, there are no legends about if he said anything or not. But all we know that happens is the man goes running off, dog in tow, freaked out, runs away. Okay. Now, suddenly, there's a rumor around town that Jean of Churchpoint is a Rougarou. Suddenly, everybody's like looking at Jean a little differently. So apparently the old man either got spooked, and whether he made it up, who knows, or whether he actually saw something in Jean of Churchpoint's eyes, going, ooh, maybe there was something nefarious there. But he, next thing you know, people around town think Jean is a Rougarou. And part of this was compounded when some women were hanging out by the river and they see this strange dog. Or was it a wolf? The strange dog / wolf hanging by the river. Seems suspicious. I don't know. Really? Well, whatever. Okay, so maybe that's Jean. But anyway, they see this dog, wolf, Rougarou maybe, hanging by the river, and the story keeps spreading. Neighbors, they start avoiding Jean's house after dark, and basically he's gets this reputation of being a Rougarou. People start avoiding him. Especially when the full moon happened. And, granted, this is probably all just gossip or whatever, but nonetheless, that's how these legends start typically. Now, I'm not saying that he wasn't a Rougarou. Who knows? I don't know. I wasn't there. You weren't there. Nobody knows. Maybe he was. Maybe the old man had something to it. Then again, that old man was kind of mean. So, I have no real sympathy for the old man. I was glad he kind of got scared off by Jean of Churchpoint. All right. Now, many years later, Jean's great-granddaughter, Thelma Deigel, apparently, she was saying that this idea of their family being cursed with werewolfness, Rougarou-ness, followed them. And, again, some people thought that werewolfness sort of happened, because you were related. Maybe it passed on through the genes. Some people thought, oh, it's a cursed house. Jean, the Rougarou, lived there, so anybody who lives there is a Rougarou. And apparently Thelma's father, he had rice fields, and he had trouble, keeping workers around. As soon as the sun started getting close to the horizon, they'd all be like, I'm out of here, woo, and they split. And you don't blame it. If you're superstitious, why hang around after dark if you don't have to? And of course, in general, it caused some disruption in keeping employment also. Now, Thelma apparently said there were certain advantages to being related to an alleged, and I say alleged Rougarou. One of which was a guy named Kermit kept pestering Thelma. It was a would-be suitor. He was in love. He was smitten with young Thelma. And so, Thelma, however, was not smitten with Kermit. Kermit was relentless. He was bothersome. He was annoying. Thelma was sick of it. So she just kind of pulled him aside and said, look, you're kind of cute and everything, but I got to tell you, there's this Rougarou thing that happens. And it turns out that, I think I'm one of them. Apparently it's like the third child or something is what she told him. And, I'm a third child. Got to watch out. I may not be able to control myself. I might bite you. I might turn you into a werewolf yourself. I'm a werewolf. That's pretty much what she told him. Well, this, of course, bothered Kermit. He kind of said, ooh, well, if that's the case, I'm out of here. So he chickened out. Never gave Thelma another look. Now, that could be for one of two reasons, it seems to me. That could be because he thought Thelma was a Rougarou. Okay, maybe. Or maybe he thought that she was a Rougarou and that she was a little bit nutty. I am a werewolf. Okay, maybe if he thought that she thought that, well, all right, I gotta go. Either way, it worked out really well because Thelma was off the hook. All right, let's go to another place because Church Point isn't the only Rougarou place in Louisiana folklore. Now, but before we go to another location, let's talk about some of the rules, Rougarou rules. Okay. Now vampires have rules. I mean, we all know vampires. You need an invitation. You need to sleep in your native soil. You got to sleep in the coffin, preferably with your native soil. Now, Rougarous have legends that have varying rules. So, for instance, in many tales, it's the Lent thing. Okay, if you don't observe Lent, you don't give up meat, you're going to become a gluttonous animal. You like meat? Well, that's all you're going to eat, and maybe you're going to eat your neighbor. Maybe you're going to eat your lover. Neener, neener, neener. It's like the universe are getting back at you for not taking the proper sacrifices necessary. All right? Now, some cases, it's a 101-day curse. So it's actually kind of like, a lot of the werewolf stories I hear, it's like you're a werewolf and you're a werewolf forever, right? So there, it's a 101-day curse, and this is contagion. So you get bitten. You got 101 days of being a werewolf. So that's basically 2 or 3 full moons of werewolfness. Now, maybe it's somebody you like in that 2 or 3 full moons. You never know who you like. Who you're going to get. So even though it's only 101 days, that could add up to some of your buddies and friends and girlfriends and boyfriends and all this other stuff. It could be one of them that gets it. So when you might have your friends for dinner, or are you having them for dinner? That's sort of the issue that you don't really know when you're a Rougarou. Now, if this is the case, if you have the 101-day curse, to get rid of the curse is actually kind of easy. You just got to bite somebody, not kill them. You got to bite them, you get chomp, and then see ya, wouldn't want to be ya. And, assuming they're still alive and they start growing hair and turn into a werewolf monster thing, then you're free. But it sucks. So ideally, you don't do it to your best buddies. Don't do it to your mom. All right. Now, another way that you can become a Rougarou is that some people say, or not even necessarily become a Rougarou, but draw attention to a Rougarou, like calling it like a dog whistle. Okay. Another Rougarou whistle, you might say, would be talking about him, just merely mentioning a Rougarou. Just saying, Rougarou, I saw this Rougarou. Well, it's almost like, it's like Rougarou ear sense go, wait, I just heard my name mentioned. Like when you have a dog and, you say, we're going to go for a walk. And they go, what? Walk? Right? Same thing. Maybe just mentioning Rougarou works the same sort of way. I don't know. So If you see a Rougarou, if you're like, oh, did you see that Rougarou? And somebody says that to you, maybe you're out wandering the woods. Hey, did you see that? I think that was a Rougarou. You say, nope, I didn't see anything. Nope. No, it was right there. I didn't see nothing. No. Didn't see anything. Nothing. No, but it was, no. Don't do it. Don't do it. All right. So don't mention Rougarous. Now, okay. Let's say you are stupid enough to mention a Rougarou in polite company. Rougarous. All right, let's say you do that, or you're wandering around and a Rougarou follows you home. There is a way out. There is a way to sort of foil a Rougarou's carnivorous attempts. What you need to do is you need to place 13 items outside your house, like, maybe on your porch or your walkway or something like that. Maybe it's stones or coins or apples or baseball cards, whatever. Because what's going to happen is the Rougarou is going to be like, I'm going to eat the guy, right? And then all of a sudden it's going to see, 13 apples. 13 is the magic number, by the way. You need 13. This is important. So it gets there, it sees 13 apples, or whatever you put there, stones, coins. And for some reason, it needs to count them. Hey, 13 apples. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. 1, 2. Because what happens is a Rougarou, for whatever reason, can't count past 12. They reach 12, and it's like, what was I saying? And then they have to start all over again. And then they're just stuck there. 1, 2, 3, 4, and then 12. And then the sun rises, they turn back into a human, and you're safe. Now, there's a couple things, just, this is just pragmatic. So you're going to put 13 things in front of your door. What you don't want to do is something like, I'm going to put some M&Ms here. Well, okay, if you put 13 M&Ms, I mean, there's, a raccoon could take 2 of them. You got to make sure it's like 13. Don't, because if an ant goes, walking away with your M&M, you're kind of screwed. So pick an item that, that an animal or someone, if you have coins, let's say you have silver dollars. Well, that's kind of stupid. Little kid's going to walk by. Hey, I got to take a silver dollar. So yeah, make sure it's something that nobody's going to pick up. This is just pragmatics. Okay. All right. Now, I have saved one of the craziest Rougarou tales for last. And this takes place in a place called Bayou Goula, which is just, I think that's a great name. Bayou Goula. Now, if you head upriver from New Orleans, it's about 70 miles north, and it's along the Mississippi. And this is a pretty old Louisiana tale. And it's basically a tale of a werewolf ball, a werewolf shindig, a werewolf party. Woo! Now, vampires, you always hear about vampire balls. You always hear about, having the, and usually they get the violin and the cello and the piano player and, and waltzing and, all that other stuff, and capes flowing and twirling and la 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 la. Well, I suspect that a werewolf ball is going to be a little bit different. It's going to be a little more of a party. It'll be less waltz and a little more zydeco. It'd be sort of what I would guess. And the clothing's probably a little less formal, a little more raggedy, a little more torn. And the thing is, you have to be a Rougarou to attend. You got to be a moon howler, and you just can't show up. You've got to be invited. Okay. Now, to be invited, you got to get the calling, which means you got to get you got to, become one, right? Well, there is an active recruitment to this. Now, and often what's involved in this recruitment are giant bats. That's right. Big ass bats. squeaking around. I don't have a really good bat impersonation. Because a lot of the Rougarous arrive to this party via giant bat. I mean, literally, werewolves are riding on the backs of giant bats to this party. They're showing up. They're not showing up by boat. I mean, I think some of them might be. Some of them are probably showing up by foot or boat or maybe car if they haven't totally turned. But a lot of them are showing up on the backs of giant bats, which sounds pretty friggin' cool to me. Okay. Werewolves on the back, riding giant bats, to a big party. I mean, I don't know if it gets any cooler than that. So one of the things these bat vehicles do, these bat horses, I don't know what you would call them, is they'll often drop Rougarous off on rooftops, or actually really wherever you want. It's sort of like Uber for, bat Ubers. And so if they wanted to, add to the recruitment, they might drop them off on a chimney, and they'd shimmy on down, sort of like a werewolf Santa. And then they'd creep on in, and they'd sneak into the sleeper's room, and they'd take a little taste. Chomp. I mean, nothing deadly, because the idea is you're recruiting, right? You don't want to kill off your recruits. So you take a little nibble, twink, and then, just enough to pass on the curse, and you got another fan for the party, right? So, yeah, I mean, kind of fun, right? So, a little bit later, the sleeper wakes up, maybe a month later, maybe, whenever the next full moon is, wakes up, all of a sudden it hears the calling. Wait, there's a party going on. Now, I'm not sure if you're a recent Rougarou, if you get bat door-to-door service. I'm not sure if all of a sudden you're like, I need to get to this party. And then, where's my bat? I have a feeling that that's reserved for, the VIP werewolves. Yeah, I don't think, newly Rougarous, you get that sort of treatment. I don't think so. That's just, that's my guess. That's my guess. So pretty fun. All I have to say is that is pretty cool. And I will say that I can't think of a better, having been to New Orleans a number of times and spent time there, enjoying music and laughter and drink and dancing and all this other stuff. I can't think of a better version of a werewolf than the partying Cajun bat riding Rougarous. I think that's awesome. And now, granted, bear in mind, that's not every single Rougarou tale has these big parties, but that's the one I like the most. I think that is, I think that's the best. So when I think of the Rougarou, I think of that big puppet that's stirring gumbo. That's the perfect metaphor, because that's what the Rougarou is. It's a big gumbo. It's a hodgepodge of all these different things, the spices, and you get your celery and your onions and all these different legends from different places and time and location and festivals, and all these different things add to this yummy big pot that is Rougarou-ness, right? So when you stir long enough, you get something weird, something different, something bizarre. And that's the Rougarou. So if you're ever in New Orleans, or maybe you're hanging out in the bayous of Louisiana, and maybe you see something hairy brush past the porch light, don't look, don't say its name. Don't even tell anybody that you saw anything, because it might be a Rougarou. And if so, it's okay, because all you need to do is maybe put 13 little items in front of your door, 13 stones. On the other hand, could invite it in for a bite, because it might take you to a really good party. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for listening. This is Michael deMeng with Junk and Disorderly. Thanks for listening, everyone. I hope you enjoyed this week's podcast and look forward to future podcasts related to the things that I like. Weird things, strange things, unusual things, sometimes everyday things. Hope to see you then.